Welcome to the International Franchise Association's Women's Franchise Committee podcast, Her Success, the Stories of Female Franchise Leaders. I am Leanne Caruso, the SVP of Franchise at Entrepreneur Media, and I'm very excited to have Edith Wiseman, the president of frandata, here with me today. If you're watching this, you'll see that we are recording in December due to Edith's background, so happy holidays to everyone. Edith has been with frandata for over 22 years, and she's been in the president role for almost 8 years. So Edith, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. And go ahead, tell us your story. Tell us how you got into franchising and what you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. It's an honor to be a part of this podcast. I think what the women in franchising do for franchising is really very, very important. So thank you for asking me to be here. So I kind of fell into franchising. When I graduated from college, I initially wanted to be a foreign service officer. I had studied German and foreign policy in undergrad and studied abroad. And I moved down to DC because my girlfriend from college offered me free rent for a month, and my parents were getting divorced. So I was like, I'm out of here. And then I realized after a month, I actually have to pay bills. So you can't just live off of, oops, there are no more student loans. So I had to start looking.
I think we
for
all
a
got
job.
that surprise. Yep.
So, I only got 1 month free, nothing more than that. And so I started looking for jobs, and anything related to like non-governmental organizations or anything that were kind of along the career path that I had envisioned for myself, paid less than what I actually needed to pay for my life, my rent, my student loans, etc. So the highest paid job that I was offered was for this research company. And, what do you do in college? You research. So it was no brainer. I can do this. And that's what the company was, frandata. And circle forward, here we are.
Here we are.
So yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a really fascinating journey. I've really worked for 3 different companies within frandata, because it was originally started by a franchise attorney. And he had gone out and gotten venture funds to grow the company into this like online, .com era. And right after I joined, it became .bust. And so the venture firm basically took over the company. Silicon Valley called the loan, and we were eventually sold off to a bank called National Cooperative Bank. So you went from like a startup with venture funds to a very traditional bank, totally different culture. And then Daryl Johnson, one of the executive leaders of the small business group, bought out frandata from the bank. And so that became version 3. So I really have worked for 3 different companies under one brand.
That's interesting. So frandata, if you could tell us a little bit about what frandata does, but I know that the industry itself has such a high regard for frandata because you kind of back up everything that we all do. And you're always providing such great research and analytics, not only to brands, but to the big organizations like IFA. And so can you just kind of give us a background of what frandata does for franchising?
Yeah, so big picture, we're a franchise market research company. So anything that touches franchising, we research. That makes it very difficult to describe, like, so what is it that you research? There's so many aspects of franchising that we delve into, from franchise development to franchise marketing to franchise operations. And it's really about best practices. But what I think most people know us for is kind of the macro picture of what's going on in franchising overall. So since we collect information, our objective is to have an FBI file on every franchisor and franchisee in the United States. And so to be able to aggregate that up and see what are the trends that are happening in this space is we're benefited from having all of this information at our fingertips. So, but it's really interesting because, when I first started frandata, everything was paper. So we would deliver things like,
Oh my
I would
gosh.
actually walk over to attorneys' offices in Washington, D.C., who had litigation in hotel rooms to drop off documents, to right now, I don't have really any paper. It's just dramatic how much have changed and how much more information we have on franchise companies compared to when I started. It's also grown significantly. So, but we also help, when we think about franchisees, franchisees are a really interesting group because they're so varied. You have single unit operators who may have another job and just owning a business, to mega franchisees that are bigger than most franchisors. So we study and profile those companies to just understand them, to survey them, and to have people be able to reach them as well.
So you've had quite a journey within frandata and been there for 22 years, which you just don't hear about anymore. So you've gotten to president role. What are some of your greatest accomplishments, excuse me, and what do you do as president overseeing the company?
So it's the greatest accomplishments that's a really difficult question, because I think of them in a kind of two different ways. One is like an accomplishment for myself, like it was a personal win where I overcame a challenge. And then there's accomplishments where I've seen things through others, right? So like when you and I met, Leanne, I will never forget that you said, oh, one of my clients just worked with you and we had a really great, result that came from that project. And that's a great accomplishment. So people come up to me and say, someone on my staff really did a great job. And it just warms my heart because, I feel like a little role in that. And, there's a gentleman on my team who came working as a lender support specialist. So his job was just to answer the phone whenever the lenders, I failed to mention that one of the things that we do is help streamline financing for banks and for franchise systems with respect to franchise loans. And so he would pick up the call and answer any question that a lender has. And I just saw that he had so much more talent, and he was not utilizing all of that talent. And so I said, I really think you would be amazing in sales. And he just said, oh, ew, like, no, thank you. That sounds horrible. Like, I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, but he's so creative. He created an app for Uber drivers. There's so many things that he gets his hands into. And over time, just started training him. And finally he was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And now he's phenomenal. He has completely taken over the franchise lending space. Everyone knows him. Everyone loves him, respects him. He's going to be at the IFA convention this year, speaking at the finance summit. And
Great.
that to me is an incredible accomplishment. For myself, I would say, the first time I went to the Franchise Times conference and gave a presentation, it was a dual presentation with my boss, Daryl. And my voice was shaking the entire presentation. And I thought I did a horrible job. And when I got it, first of all, didn't want to do it. I was scared to do it. It was just like horrifying, the thought to like get up in front of hundreds of people. And when I got down, John Hamburger, who's, the owner of Franchise Times, he goes, I didn't know you were that funny. He was like, that was really good. I was like, what? Like, thank you. He probably doesn't remember that comment, but it just like cemented in my brain. So
Right.
That was a pretty big moment for me.
Oh, that's so cool. I think speaking engagements are always funny because you think that they're going completely one way, and then you find out you're way too in your own head, and really you were quite wonderful. So that's awesome.
Yes. Yes.
So you've mentioned a few people. So who else has been influential in your journey along the way? Because you've seen
Um,
franchising change over the course of time, and maybe these people are in franchising who have influenced you, but I'd love to know.
the first person who influenced me, I have to say, is my dad. Um, he was a stockbroker. And so and I was involved in kind of helping him like document things from an early age, but he's a storyteller. And so he would always be telling us stories and giving us tips on essentially sales.
Mhm.
And, so like I grew up with like understanding sales in a way that I don't think most people do. His favorite story is back in the day, they used to cold call out of a yellow page book. So like when he first started at a stock brokerage firm, it was like plop, it came down the yellow book, like just start dialing for dollars.
Mhm.
And he called this guy in Texas, and he deciphered from the guy's name that he might be Jewish. And so he was like, what does a Jewish guy like you in Texas do without some good New York bagels and lox? And then he subsequently sent him bagels from New York City and lox. And, so his tips were, make a connection with someone, find some way to wow them, make them laugh, and you'll have a customer for life.
Mhm.
So he's really my first big influencer, because every career test I've ever taken, even from a very early age, said I was going to be in sales.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so I guess, foreign service be gone. um,
All those dreams and hopes.
yeah. And then when I got hired at frandata, there was a guy who was hired as head of sales. His name was Bill, and he had brought career builders to their IPO. So he's a pretty significant, experienced sales guy. And I wanted to move over from research. So I started as a researcher, and I wanted to move over into sales. And he later told me that he was going to fire me because he didn't think I would make it. And I became the biggest producer. And so that was more kind of a seminal moment for me, that like, I'm too valuable. Like, you can't fire me, and as long as
I'll show you.
you show your value, that like you're kind of invincible in many ways. So that was an influence kind of in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, and then Daryl Johnson, who's our CEO, has definitely been a huge influencer, along with our COO, Paul Wilbur. They both have always kind of believed in my next step before I even saw it. And, Daryl, when he bought the company from NCB, he sat me down and said, I can't do this without you. So,
Oh,
yeah, I have to thank all of those people.
yeah, that's great. That's great to have that support. And even that's testament to 22 years in one company that you've obviously been supported and nurtured along the way. Um, so,
Absolutely.
so how are you doing that with your own team and your own staff? I know you just gave the story of the sales professional and franchise lending. So how do you do that, especially now that we're kind of all virtual and all over the place, and you've got a young family now. So how has that changed, and what do you kind of do to keep your team motivated?
So, I think there's a couple things I try and focus on. One is just being a role model, meaning I don't ask anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do. And if someone's struggling, then I'll jump in and dig in with them. Like, I'm not above anything,
Mhm.
whether that's data processing. And granted, it might not be the best use of my time, but it is something that I want to make sure that people understand. Like, I'm not above you in being able to do any type of work. And I'm here always for you. So my door's always open no matter what. Um, I think the other thing is just, I'm not a micromanager. So giving people the freedom to like figure things out on their own way, knowing that they're going to be supported, is a big one. And if I'm constantly trying to improve and showing people, like, I think we're all a work in progress until the day we die.
Mm.
And so if I'm doing that, showing other people, like, I want them to, hopefully that'll show them that they should be doing that too. And I
Lead
think
by
I'm just,
example.
yeah, and
Yeah.
just being very honest about where my shortcomings and weaknesses are. Like, I will straight up say, like, you're better at this than I am. So, like, I'm listening to you. And I think that's also really important.
That's great. So, how do you continue to, especially in a virtual world, and we're not always together like we used to be, but how do you continue to learn in order to kind of stay on top? You said that you're continuously learning till the day you die, which I completely agree with. So, what do you do to stay on top of trends or analysis or research to keep yourself at the top of your game?
So, I will say I was so much better when I was younger. I used to go to the coffee shop in the morning and sit down and read every industry publication before I would go to work. But these days, now that I'm not in the car as much, I would listen to podcasts, and I do make a habit of every single day. We have an internal system where we share news articles. And so I'll make sure to look at every news article that's posted. So if someone else in the company thinks that this was an important news article to share, like, I will look at every single one of them. And then I have a series of newsletters that come to my email. So throughout the day, I will make time to make sure that I'm reading all of those that content. So those are the primary ways. I've gotten more into podcasts because I'm walking, and so I'll listen to franchise podcasts, because I think it's just really helpful to, like, hear what other people are saying, especially about their own business, right? So, like, I can study the business, we can study the business, and we can survey people. But when I hear the perspective from someone, if it's an executive interview, I find that an interesting layer to, like, build the full picture about a brand or about an industry.
Yeah, I think podcasts have definitely become a game changer, especially, again, I'm the same. I don't have time to read and I'm not in the car. So I just have to listen and I have to just continuously consume information. And we don't get the opportunity to sit and interview an executive from a franchise brand. And we kind of all operate on these silos. And so it's nice to be able to kind of glean that information from somebody else's conversation, and that's just the best we can do to stay ahead. So yeah, I'm right there with you. And then, you know, add a kid into it, and then it just changes everything. So what are you guys? That said, what are you guys researching right now? What's trending in franchising, or what are you guys kind of looking at?
So this year has been really interesting, in terms of the types of research that we've been doing. I'd say that most of them are related to the significant changes that have been happening, right? So we're working right now on a pricing project, and we just finished up another pricing project. One is on pricing relative to the consumer, benchmarking how brands are dealing with both inflation pressures, but also pressures from franchisees to raise prices. And then prices relative to when the franchisor is the manufacturer of products, how to price those goods to franchisees relative to profit margins, et cetera. But we've done third-party delivery research, remodeling requirements, impact policies. So all these things that have to do with getting franchisees. So remodeling incentives is how there are a lot of brands who haven't been keeping up with standards. And, in this environment where some brands didn't do as well as others, how are they handling with getting franchisees to upgrade and refresh to keep the brand current with consumers, so that consumers don't go to their competitors who may be keeping their brand more fresh. So it's been a really wide range of incredibly interesting projects. Coming up in the future, we're working with the IFA on doing 2 surveys a year to be able to understand how franchisors are and franchisees are dealing with the current environment, to be able to talk with lawmakers and others relative to what the franchise business is experiencing. So it's going to be really powerful research that anyone who's listening, I really encourage you to participate in, to make sure that your business challenges are being heard uniquely. Like, you're a small business, but you're also a franchise small business, and franchise business interests need to be protected uniquely.
That's great. I just think the work that you guys do is just so powerful. And like you even said, the first time you met me, the product that you produce is just so interesting and just incredibly valuable to our industry. So thank you for all that you do for franchising, and I think that you're just amazing. And I love watching you and having the pleasure of knowing you as well. So thank you for taking the time.
Likewise.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna end it with one question, and this
Oh,
is one of
okay.
those on the spot questions. If you could tell yourself one thing from 20 years ago, what would that be?
Ooh, okay. So I would say, listen to what people say. And what I mean by that is listen to the positive things they say. So most of us, we hear what people say, the negative things, and we absorb it, we dwell on it, we can't ever forget it. And somehow the positive things just like go straight past us. And so if we really dwelled on the amazing things that people tell you, and don't just dismiss them, oh, like I'm too humble, like, oh, that's okay. Like, take it, own it, live it, and just be happy that like people are acknowledging who you are in such a beautiful way. And yeah, that would be my piece of advice.
That's perfect, and a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much, Edith.
Thank you, Leanne.
All right, talk soon.